Hey moms and dads and boys and girls, today's question, what would Disney songs sound like if they were written during this quarantine? Wear a mask. Wear a mask. You can craft one really fast. Tie a scarf around your neck, that's what the CDC has asked. Get some cloth, rubber bands, or sew on your own by hand. It will help you be protected so that you won't get infected. So when you're at the store, there's a woman on aisle 4 who starts coughing on the broccoli florets. Go on and keep your distance, and in this key instance, wear a mask. Oui, a mask. Wear a mask. At Aladdin time. I can't show you the world, but I can show you this bathroom and the kitchen, the guest room and the den. But yeah, that's all. A whole new world, a world with nothing left to do. You ask if you can go, your dad says no. All right here, this whole new world with you. On the day when they say that I'm no longer stuck here, I'm gonna go hang with my bros, watch a game, play some hoops, meet them up for a cold beer. I'm gonna go hang with my bros. Can you feel the gloves tonight? I got a curbside pickup soon, yeah. And I'm scared to touch all of the bags they're handling. It'll be that way till June.
Hey, good morning, everyone. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name's Garry, and yes, I can feel the gloves tonight. I'm one of the pastors here. So glad that you decided to join in this morning. From wherever it is you're tuning in from on live stream, your backyard, your kitchen, dining room, family room, another province, another city, maybe another country. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Really glad that you're here with us this morning. Today we're going to be wrapping up a series that we started last week, just a little mini-series called Conversations. And what we thought, we want to be a church that, is practical, relevant, and just in different ways unleashing God's extravagant love on the city. And one of the ways to do that is just do what we did last week, and what we're going to do today is just have a conversation with people from our own church or from our community to kind of give us some advice and share their experiences with this new normal we find ourselves in with COVID-19. And so you're going to have a chance. We've got some more experts on here today. I'm going to introduce them in just a second here. You're going to have a chance to ask some questions. And you can do that two ways. You can do it in the chat room. And if you're watching on a device right now and you're thinking, I don't see a chat room, it's one of two reasons. You're watching on a TV or you're watching via our YouTube channel. So you can leave those things running. You don't have to turn them off or anything. Just log into the meetingplace.org using another device, computer, a tablet, your phone, and click on Watch Live Stream Now, and it should show you the chat room, so you can enter your questions there, or you can email us at connect@themeetingplace.org. The address is on your screen there, and we're going to give you a chance to do that in just a moment here. I want to get us started by introducing our guests today. Our first guest right here is a longtime partner at the Meeting Place, a good friend. His name is Dr. David Forrest, and he is our infectious disease specialist right here in Nanaimo, which is kind of cool. I didn't even know we had one until a few years ago when I was meeting with a friend with you. And then next to him is Dr. John Ronald, again, a good friend. I've been on a few motorbike rides with this guy. And I have to read this because you've got quite a title, Respiratory Medicine and Disease Specialist. So you're right in there with this whole COVID thing being a respiratory illness for the most part. So I know both of these gentlemen have been on the front lines. And thank you so much that I mean, it's absolutely blows my mind that you're actually able to be here today. I thought when I phoned you and said, hey, it would be great to have these two on, there was no way it was going to happen, but here we are. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. We had a great one earlier in the week, and thanks again for coming out. So just to kind of set us up for this morning, way back in 2020 when this whole thing kind of got launched on us, the whole COVID-19 thing, our understanding of what it is, how it infects people, who it infects, and how we can protect ourselves from being infected has all evolved over the last several months. And along with that evolution, all the changing information and recommendations that have accompanied all that has also created a bunch of confusion. I know myself, I hear one thing one day and I hear something else the next. I hear one person say, do this, and then I don't see them doing that, and it's just so confusing. I remember when it was declared a pandemic, trying to figure out what to do to stay safe was just like, you had no idea. Some people were saying, stay inside, don't go out. Some people were saying, no, you're better outside. Some people were saying, wipe your groceries down when you come home. And other people, no, you don't have to wipe your groceries down. And then we got into the whole, buy toilet paper thing. I don't know what that was about, but you remember that, the whole, buy your toilet paper, don't buy toilet paper. And on it went. Some agencies were even saying, look, this thing is not that bad. It's like a really nasty cold or a flu. And others are saying, no, this is what is advertised. It's bad. Like, keep yourself safe. But it was all around just that, keeping yourself safe. And then one day I heard this strategy, and it kind of just made sense to me. I can't remember the doctor's name. I don't even remember if I read it or heard it, but it just grabbed me. And what happened in this conversation, somebody asked this doctor, they said, what would you recommend people do to keep safe from this thing? And the answer they gave kind of blew me away because it was the opposite of what everyone else was saying. And here's what the doctor said. I'm paraphrasing. I didn't write it down at the time, but this is the gist. They said, most people are asymptomatic, meaning they have the virus, they just don't know how they don't know they have it. They're not showing any outward symptoms. They feel fine, they're just going around, but they have the virus and they could be spreading it. And I've heard numbers, 45% or so of people that don't even know they have it. And so he said, the best piece of advice I can give is this. And he said, treat this as the one another virus. And I was like, when I first started, I was like, one another virus? What's the guy talking about? And he says, because the best way to slow this virus down, to flatten the curve, is, the new vernacular that we have around this thing, is to assume you have it and act accordingly. And I thought, wow, that really echoes some words that Jesus said when he was asked about, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, love God, but then love others. Put others' needs before your own. And that's what this one another, how the doctor was seeing this. It's like, what you're doing is not trying to keep yourself safe. You're trying to keep people safe from you. And so we're going to open up here, and we're going to start with you, Dr. Forrest, on what are your thoughts around that strategy, being this one another virus and keeping others safe from you, just assume you have it and act accordingly.
Well, thanks very much, Gary, and thanks very much for inviting us here. It's a great opportunity. Thanks for the leadership in providing this for our community. I think we've learned an awful lot about SARS-CoV-2, the cause of COVID-19, over the last several months. And I think that approach, frankly, is an excellent one. I think that one of the things we've learned is that our neighborhood is global. This is a virus that affects the entire world. Like other viruses, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, whether you're old or young, everyone can get this virus. It affects everybody. So I think that the philosophy, and as you say, comes from Jesus' teachings, love thy neighbor, is a very important way of approaching this that is going to keep us safe and get us through this whole thing. And it's not just about loving my neighbor right next to me, and that's the whole purpose of the parable about the Good Samaritan. It's about people that you don't think are your neighbors. The reality is the Americans are our neighbors. All Albertans are our neighbors. The person across the street is, the homeless person, the very rich person. They're all our neighbors. We have to take care of one another if we're going to get through this. I think that what's very clear is that this virus it's a respiratory virus, which means that it affects primarily the respiratory system. But there's several things that we've learned about this. First of all, it is primarily transmitted through the air. So fomites, or inanimate objects that can become contaminated, can be a means of transmitting it, but by and large, the vast majority of transmission occurs through the air. So it's really important that we prevent that. The second thing is that you're absolutely right. I mean, about 40% in some of the cohort studies that have been done, people are asymptomatic with this virus. So they are transmitting or able to transmit it without recognizing they're even sick. So that's important. I think another important thing is that the virus causes unusual symptoms. Everything from loss of smell to even clots going to the lungs or heart attacks can be a manifestation of disease. So there are a whole lot of different things that it can cause. So I think coming back to the question is, how can we prevent this? Well, what we can do is just do the things that are an invocation of God's direction. I mean, love our neighbors, take care of one another, treat others as we would have them treat us. Consider that we may have the virus, they may have the virus. And if we all do things to try to prevent ourselves giving it to others, and if others do those things for us, we will prevent this from being transmitted. Yeah. So that means maintaining physical distancing, not congregating in enclosed spaces, not partying, not going to bars, really, or nightclubs. And I think it really importantly means the use of masks. Masks are a very effective tool, I think, in preventing the transmission of this virus. We've got lots of data from that, from preventing transmission of TB, for example. And to some extent, they will also protect ourselves. But the important thing, I've labeled the masks that we utilize as neighbor protective equipment, because they are protecting you from me. And that's the important thing. I may harbor this virus and not know it. And it's important that I protect you from me.
Yeah. I love the way you talked about, we're global neighbors. Like, this world has become very small through air travel and everything else, but even the animosity that we're feeling between provinces, you see somebody else driving around with Alberta license plates or Washington State or something, and it's just, but you don't know their story, right? We all have a story. And so I think it's really important. That's part of loving your neighbor. It's just, you don't know why they're here. They may live here, or maybe they're here for a family member. You don't know. So like Bonnie Henry says, be kind, be safe, all that kind of thing. So John, we'll flip over to you here. And what are your thoughts around this whole strategy of the one another virus and things like that, and just assuming you have it and act accordingly?
Yeah, to pick up on that theme, we're all in the same boat, and we're going to get through it together. Yeah. The trick is how to get creative about making life go on, getting together, doing church, doing school, having businesses survive this, providing health care, and doing all of those things, but doing them safely. And so when I look around this room that your audience can't see all of, there is physical distancing, there is mask wearing, there is hand hygiene. You're doing all of the things, but you haven't been paralyzed with fear. And I think that that's one of the difficult things that this has caused, is just a pandemic of anxiety. And when people get afraid, they sometimes withdraw, sometimes they lash out at others, and they do a lot of things that aren't terribly Christ-like. And so the trick, I think, is taking a deep breath and figuring out how to move on, how to carry on, how to restart, but in a responsible way, right? And I think that there's lots of ways that we can do it, and I've seen some very creative solutions where we can take care of each other, but also get on with the activities of life. It's so important. I've seen a huge improvement in the mood of my children going back to high school. I want them to be safe at high school. I don't want them to get the virus. I don't want them to become a means of transmitting that virus to anybody, but I want them to have the benefit of being with their peers and getting their education and all of those things.
Yeah.
So I think that's a key point for me.
Yeah, and yeah, so I mean, it seems so simple, but like you say, there's so much emotion wrapped up with this. I mean, just even being, for the first couple of months when we were in lockdown, being, you know, all our routines were just shattered, and all of a sudden, people that are used to being apart, even for the workday, we just got some mic issues here. We're just trying to fix it as best we can. But it really comes down to that adjusting to our new normal. So I'll just let them see if we can get this mic here. Just a reminder, get your questions in either through the chat room. I've got a couple that have come in through email, and we're going to get to as many of those as we can. So I'll just wait and see if we can get this mic working here. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's try that.
And neighbor, I'm willing to share my microphone if it comes down to that.
There you go.
We're in the same bubble.
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully that's working. But here we go. Here's a question that came in via email. With all the social distancing we're doing, wearing masks, washing our hands, probably more so than I think we've ever washed your hands before for a lot of people, is it advisable or necessary to have a flu shot? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely it is. I think that one of the benefits, frankly, that we saw early on in the pandemic was at the tail end of the flu season, influenza dropped right off. So, you know, there's no question that isolation at home and lockdown and social distancing work. And I think many of these measures are going to help reduce the spread of a whole lot of respiratory viruses, not just SARS-CoV-2. I think it's really important, though, just as I want to emphasize what John was saying, that we need to get back to interactions. We need to restart our economy. We can't afford to go back into lockdown. We need social interaction as human beings. So it's really important that we're able to do those things. And, you know, getting a flu shot is going to be a very helpful way of preventing getting yet another respiratory virus, influenza. And influenza, in fact, causes a significant burden of illness and occupies a lot of healthcare resources every flu season. So reducing the amount of flu that we're seeing is going to reduce the impact on healthcare. It's going to keep people well and safe. So I think it's a very important thing to be doing, particularly this year.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add to that, John?
No, I guess I would just echo that as the respiratory guy, the lung guy in the room. We have our ICU occupied by respiratory illnesses throughout the winter season. And if someone through getting the flu shot can reduce the chances of them getting sick and requiring one of those ventilators, then that frees up that resource for someone else who might need it. You've felt the angst about a second wave that might be on its way.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that angst is around, will those resources be available for me when I need them in terms of on the patient side of things.
Yeah.
And so we need people to be as strong and prepared for that second wave as possible.
Yeah.
And that means flu shots. Dave and I get them every single year in the ICU. A nurse, like maybe your daughter, will come around and poke us in the arm. And so we're not asking anybody to do something that we wouldn't ourselves do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Here's another question. This is another great one. Do we know enough about this virus yet to know whether life will ever return to normal? It seems that once a virus is in existence, that it never goes away. We just learn to respond to it. So is that what we are learning, that this is a new normal?
Well, I guess two things. The first is, in terms of the virus itself, we don't know what's going to happen with it. SARS-CoV-1, which was the cause of SARS, you remember back in 2003, disappeared. We don't know why it disappeared, it just went away. MERS, which is another coronavirus in the Middle East, continues to circulate there, but it has never actually got outside of the Middle East, really. So we don't know what's going to happen with this virus. There's thoughts that it will probably continue to circulate. It will continue to be an issue potentially forever. but it may become far less virulent, much like other coronaviruses. Coronaviruses cause about 15% of the common cold. They've been around for a long time. So it may just become another common cold and not a big deal. So we don't know. I think the second issue is I think that we're going to have a new normal. You know, I can see we have pandemics really about every decade. So the next one could be worse. What are we learning from this experience? I think that our Asian neighbors learned a lot from the first SARS back in 2003, and they've adopted pretty widespread mask usage. Just they do this normally. This has become part of their routine. And so, for example, I can see us going to hockey games in Rogers Arena, and everyone's wearing a mask, some in Oilers masks, some in Canucks masks, whatever, but they're all wearing masks, or we're going to concerts in masks. We're going to be doing things, I think, differently. We're going to have a new normal. Yeah. So I don't know that we're going to get back to what we had before, but, you know, again, just as John said, we've got to get back to interacting and get our economy going again. Yeah. We just have to find a new way of doing it.
Yeah, I remember in the 70s, the 80s, Canuck fans used to wear bags to the games. So now it's masks, I guess. So anyway, yeah, so there we go. So here's a question that came in via chat. Something I've been wondering about, what do we understand about the several strains of COVID currently spreading, and how do we compare them and for our protection develop a vaccine that actually attacks our regional strain? Can we assume the strain across Canada is the same strain as around the world? So that question, I think, really comes down to vaccine, yes, no, when? And I'll let you speak to that, John.
Yeah, I might get Dave to rescue me at some point if I flounder. But we're all looking forward to vaccines, right? You'll have seen the news saying that we've purchased or pre-purchased another 20 million doses for Canada recently. And so governments are waiting, governments are investing in this as a means to slow down the spread of this virus. I don't think anyone in the medical community thinks that they will be 100% effective, right? Mm-hmm. I think that everyone believes they will be effective at reducing the amount of virus in our community. Mm-hmm. I think there will have to be some adjustment. But if you think about it, if they can design an effective vaccine against one strain, then they can design an effective vaccine against another strain. And so there will have to be ongoing monitoring, ongoing adjustments made. But I think you'll start somewhere, and you'll start with the first widely available vaccines, which won't be for a while and won't get us out of our winter season here, certainly. Yeah. So I think we have to fall back on what we already know works while we're waiting for that first vaccine. But then I think there'll be a second one and a third one. And as you know, with the flu, there's a different vaccine every year, and the scientists do their best to get it spot on, and sometimes they do better, and sometimes not. But the vaccine is always somewhat effective at reducing the virus in the population.
Anything to add there, Dave?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think there's a lot of faith been put in vaccine development as a cure for this. Talk about herd immunity, developing enough immunity in the population. Well, we know that we're learning anyway that immunity to this virus does not necessarily mean that you can't get infected with it again. And that's the usual thing for the common cold. In fact, the same thing for influenza. The second thing is that vaccines are not going to be a panacea. They are a long way from being, being able to be used. We have to make sure that they're effective, that they're safe. And there are some vaccines for some diseases, like dengue, for example, don't work or didn't work when they were initially developed because they actually made the disease worse if you got it. And so there's a lot we have to learn about whether vaccines are going to be an effective tool. I think what it comes back to is that, yes, I think as John has said, the vaccines I really believe will ameliorate or make better the disease. They might not necessarily prevent it as you do with measles, for example. But I think that we have to recognize that it's all these other things that we're doing to take care of one another that are going to be the most important. What we need to do, we don't have much COVID on the island here.
Yeah.
We need to prevent curves. We should be focusing on preventing the curve, not flattening it, preventing it. And we can do that by doing all these things to take care of one another. The vaccine will be icing on the cake, but that is really the main thing.
You touched on something there, and it has to go with the question that came in on the chat room. And it's around, going into our new normal. Like you have both talked about, we need to take precautions, but at the same time, we need to get back to living life. And so what would be some ideas that kind of circulate around your head about that? Maybe somebody in a house is really sees themselves as vulnerable, and the other person, maybe it's a spouse or whatever, it's brother, sister, whatever, and the other's just like, it's not a big deal. Like, I'm going to take the precautions, but I'm not going to hole up and be afraid of this thing. Like, so, I mean, I think there's a lot of that going on. How you deal with this thing moving forward. It's like, I'm staying in, the other one's saying, no, I want to go out. We need to get back to having people over, that kind of thing. So what would be some strategies or things that would help people to kind of get out there and do the social interaction, but do it in a safe way? I don't know if I'm asking that really well, but...
No, I think you are, and I think that there's a couple of things. Again, it just emphasizes the importance of the golden rule, right? I mean, that it's, the virus is going to affect a lot of our young people. I mean, it's affect them. It's not going to make them terribly sick. It's probably not going to kill them. It's going to be harmful to people that are particularly vulnerable. So we have to protect our vulnerable by protecting each other. That's important. I think that we absolutely need to figure out ways that we can interact better. I mean, let's face it, one of the things that we lose in this sort of interaction here at church is fellowship. We're not interacting amongst each other. We're all doing this kind of remotely by Zoom. We've lost a lot in not having that. So I can foresee that we are going to be able to do things, we're going to do things differently. As I say, I really feel that mask usage is going to be an effective tool in helping us interact and do things more closely together in closed spaces. But there's lots of interaction we can do. It's going to be a little bit harder, obviously, in the coming winter months, but we can do a lot more outdoors that's safe. I mean, that's a very effective way of getting rid of the aerosol. Is doing things outdoors. It doesn't circulate in an enclosed area. So I think there are ways that we will learn to interact better, but absolutely we need to find ways of doing that. And it's particularly, I think, important for younger people to be able to do that.
Yeah. Another question that's come in on chat. Of course, different countries have different rules about self-isolating when you cross a border. So the question is, if you come back from travel outside of Canada and you go and get a test and you're negative, do you still have to quarantine for 14 days, or does that negate the 14-day quarantine?
I believe the answer is yes. You still need to quarantine. Yeah.
Okay. Herd immunity. You mentioned it. I think it was you mentioned it. Possibility. We're going that direction. It seems like some of our southern neighbors, that's kind of the approach they seem to be taking. It's just, this going back. I think a lot of people, they just want to go back to the way it was. And I don't think that's possible moving forward by most of the reports I'm hearing. We just have to adjust to a new normal like we always do. You brought up a good point in one of our earlier conversations before we went live about when they first introduced seat belts, mandatory wearing of seat belts. It was just like, there was a lot of pushback on that for quite a while. It was done for our safety. And so around that whole herd immunity thing, like, do we just throw caution to the wind? Like, and just say, forget it, there's no way we're going to get through this unless we just build up resistance to it? Or?
Well, I think the whole objective of public health has been to have this at a manageable level, but it doesn't overwhelm us. I think that the throwing caution to the wind approach was tried in Italy and New York and didn't work very well. Their health systems were overwhelmed. And I think there's significant risk of that happening. And the reality is that we know that 80% of the deaths in Canada have been amongst the vulnerable elderly. And so, yeah, we're going to be doing a lot of the cost of throwing caution to the wind is that we're going to be probably resulting in a lot of death, particularly amongst those who are most vulnerable. There's a real risk of overwhelming our healthcare system. So what we're wanting to do is try to manage this at a low enough level that it doesn't break out, that there is enough immunity gradually developed, recognizing that's fairly short-lived, but nonetheless, that it stops the virus from spreading significantly, in the hopes that we'll get to a point where we can improve that herd immunity through vaccination.
Yeah. Okay, we got lots of questions coming in, and I'm looking at our time, and so I'm trying to, okay, which is, not that one question is better than the other, but like what one's going to impact most people. And there's one question on here that I think is very relevant, and I'll direct this to you, John. If I am immune compromised, but I have to go to my workplace, what are some things I can do to keep safe?
Well, I mean, it's very important that people are able to feel safe where they're working, absolutely. And that's true of Dr. Forrest and myself at the hospital, and a lot of people in the first wave were afraid to go to the emergency room because they were so afraid that they were going to contract the virus there, which we felt quite, you know, a little bit possibly amused by that, because of course we're all wearing battle gear waiting for patients to come in sick with the virus. So when you're going to your workplace and you feel that your immune system is not up to the challenge of handling this virus, or that you're more susceptible, you're going to do all of the things that we've talked about. You're going to keep your distance from people. And I think that for the people who are less worried about themselves, be respectful again about that distance. Don't come inside someone's personal space quickly. Give them a chance to back up if they need to. Stay back at a counter, you know, when you're visiting an establishment. Do all of the things that you think that someone on the other side of that interaction might be a little anxious, might be a little afraid. But if we're all doing that, then the person can rely on the physical distancing part, which I think is the most important intervention, and then rely on the fact that everyone's wearing masks. And I think that in any indoor setting, unless you've got a microphone in front of you, maybe, we should have masks on. And because we can't necessarily anticipate when that physical distancing is going to be impossible in that moment. You might be walking down an abandoned hallway and think, oh, I'm good, I don't need my mask, unless someone comes around the corner and all of a sudden you're into a close interaction. So I would say be confident that you're doing all of the right things and everyone else is going to do them as well.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier in a conversation we're having, you said, always ask someone what they need. And I think that's a great strategy. If we're always, again, it comes back to this putting others first and just saying, what do you need kind of thing. And we do that at our staff team a lot. We ask each other, you know, if we're in a meeting and we're discussing stuff, it's like, what do you need to hear, or what do you need right now in this moment? So I think it's a great strategy to just carry forward wherever we are. Grocery stores, gas station, whenever we're outside in the public, just ask people what they need and just act accordingly. So, man, I would love to keep going here, and there's a lot of great questions coming in. I'm hoping that maybe you guys, when you're off camera here, you can jump on our chat room. We got a couple of computers here that you might be able to scroll through and just answer some questions that come in, if you don't mind doing that. But I'm going to ask you each one last question before we wrap up here, and you got a minute or less to answer it. But how does, you guys are both Jesus followers, have a faith in that God is who he says he is, and he's going to do everything he promised to do, that he's good and he can be trusted. So based on that definition of faith, how does your faith inform how you act in light of COVID-19?
Well, I think the first thing is we talked about this before. I see two things. The first is that There's certain things that I can control in my life. There's things that I can control in terms of the care that I provide for patients, and there's things I can't control. And I put my faith in God that He will take care of those things. And I really believe that He will. It may not always work out the way we'd like, but He will take care of it. I think the second thing is that I really try to live my life by the golden rule, and I really try to treat others as they would want them to treat me, and I really try to love others. And for me, in dealing with this illness, any illness that I deal with, is that I really care for my patients, and I can't always cure them, but I can always care for them. And to me, that's what sort of informs the way I live my life.
Nice. How about you, John?
Yeah, in our lives and in our career as healthcare providers, we can't be paralyzed by fear. We can't. It just won't work out. We have to have some degree of confidence, and I feel like we can draw from Scripture. Do not be anxious about anything, is what Philippians tells us. To be confident, to be able to move forward and get on with providing care, taking energy from my faith and putting that out there to the people that I'm looking after with confidence. And so that's my thoughts on how my faith can be injected into my life and into my workplace.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for taking time out of your crazy schedules, with all that's going on. And like I say, I wish we could go a bit longer, but it's been very informative. I know I've learned lots listening to you talk, and it really does come to that simple strategy. Love your neighbor as yourself, kind of thing. So thanks for coming. Again, we'll try and get them onto the chat rooms to see if they can answer any more questions for you. But I just want to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you for bringing your questions up. I hope you found this informative. I'm going to close in prayer, and I'm going to actually read a prayer that I think is very apropos for today. I came across it about a week and a half ago, and it just stood out to me. Don't know who wrote it. I just saw it posted, but I think it's very relevant. And so I'm going to ask you to just close your eyes, pray as I read this, and just meditate on these words as I read them through. May we who are merely inconvenienced remember those whose lives are at stake. May we who have no risk factors remember the most vulnerable. May we who have the luxury of working from home remember those who must choose between preserving their health and paying their rent. May we who have the flexibility to care for our children when their schools close remember those who have no options. May we who have had to cancel our trips remember those who have no safe place to go. May we who settle in for a quarantine at home remember those who have no home. As fear tries to grip our country, let us choose love during this time, when we cannot physically wrap our arms around each other. Let us find ways to be the loving embrace of God to our neighbor. Amen.